another episode of Coder Conversation. Today we have special guest Andy Wong, former Facebook, Meta, and Google engineer. Hey, how's it going, Andy?
You got. I'm good. I worked at Amazon and Google, not Meta. I've had an offer from
Oh,
Meta,
okay.
but I turned them down.
Oh, yeah, that's my mistake. I have to correct that. But yeah, can you tell us a little bit about your background? You have a really interesting software journey.
Yeah, sure. So, hi, I'm Andy. Some of you may be familiar with me, some maybe not. For everyone else, yeah, I have been in the industry for about like 7-ish years now. I actually got my start as a associate engineer at a little startup called, at that time, Propel Marketing. So this is in April 2015. Before that, I was actually pivoting to software from a liberal arts degree. I graduated with a double major in English and clinical psychology because I thought those would be the two things I would do for the rest of my life. Turns out I fooled myself, or I played myself. Sorry. I attended a boot camp program basically about a year after I graduated. That was called Startup Institute. Fun fact, if you look them up now, you're probably not going to find anything because they kind of went defunct. That's a different story. But I like to mention that because sometimes like someone will message me and they say like, oh, how do I follow in your footsteps? And I'll be like, you literally can't.
Right.
Join General Assembly or someplace else. Um, but yeah, I was a early career pivot into software engineering, and it's been a really great journey so far. So I was at a startup for a few years, built a lot of cool stuff. I think maybe you can probably read about it somewhere. Moved on to Wayfair, which is, I feel like some folks are probably a little bit more familiar with Wayfair, but e-commerce company based in the headquarters, sorry, in Boston, Massachusetts, which is actually where I'm from, where I've more or less been my whole life. And then I did a little bit more media work there. I did a lot of some mentorship as well, just what really kind of like got me kind of invested in the kind of pay it forward culture a bit more. And then around early 2020, start of 2020, I started Amazon, where I was a software engineer in the Amazon pharmacy, actually, which we actually had our public launch later the same year that I joined. So, well, technically when I joined, it was like they were rebranding it a few different times. But basically, the department that I was in was like their online pharmacies. And that was really fun. And I can talk about that later because I'm probably like in a minority of vocal people who enjoy their time at Amazon as engineers. Um, and then I, you know, took the call, went to Google next. I joined there basically the height of COVID. So unfortunately, I didn't get to like indulge in a lot of the perks that all my coworkers would talk about. Like they talk about like, oh yeah, the cafeterias and like the accumulating like tickets, like points towards like free massages. I'm like, that's great, but I don't really want to go into I don't want to go in person just to get a massage. COVID massage, yeah, it sounds weird. Also, I was busy with a baby, so I'm like, I don't know, my hands are tied. Um, Currently at Block, formerly known as Square, formerly known as payment processing company with a terminal at your restaurant that people kind of like fight over when they want to split the bill. I don't know. I'm a senior engineer there. It's been pretty fun. Um, and yeah, I mean, nowadays when I'm not like just working day to day, I'm probably before 9, after 5. I'm family man. I've got wife, kid, second kid on the way. Just a lot of chilling, relaxing, listening to music. Well, and then late at night when everyone else is asleep is when I really get to like the meat of what people care about, which is just like writing about my little adventures. Um, yeah, that's that's the
Yeah,
whole
so
indie experience.
it's pretty interesting. You mentioned like you don't have a software engineering background. Kind of similar to me. My background is actually in accounting, and I shifted over to software engineering. So, how do you go from like English and psychology to software? That's kind of a big transition.
So I, I want to say it's a little bit organic. It's not really that organic. Um, so I graduated. I was looking for like writing and editorial gigs, in like for a very brief stint. If you like look me up on Google, um, I was once like an accredited writer and editor, like unpaid, of course, with Bleacher Report, which I'm not going to say more about. You guys can look that up yourself. Um, but as I was kind of applying for roles, I mean, online journalism, anything you can do to kind of like pad your skill set to stand out. So in my case, it was kind of like, yeah, if you can know how to do like some markup languages a little bit, it can kind of help for like online publishing. And so I was kind of looking at that, doing kind of like a self-guided Code Academy approach. And then one day I actually had a former classmate who was my senior. He was hosting like a WAMP stack, like Windows application stack workshop somewhere. And that was like really surprising to me because I knew he definitely did not have a CS background, and he actually did like improv comedy. Like that's what he was known for. So kind of seeing him make that change, I was kind of like, how the heck you do it? And so he had actually previously, like the year before, gone through the same program that I ultimately went through. It was sort of funny because like I asked him up front, like, hey, how was your experience? Did you feel like it kind of prepared you really well? And was it worth it? And his response was quite candidly like, not really, but it was really great for the network. So yeah, I feel like that's not still somewhat true today. Like you go to the boot camp, it itself doesn't teach you everything you need to know, but it does kind of give you, it can help bootstrap you a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through that, and I basically, gosh, it took me like almost a year afterward before I landed my first full-time role. In between that, I think I had like one project that was a kind of collaboration with one of the designers that was also going through the same boot camp, because the program I went to, there's actually 4 tracks. So like I went with the web dev track, but there's also like a front end kind of like UI UX track and marketing and sales. So I was friends with one of the designers there that she technically gave me like helped me get my first like unofficial role, because she did like the designs for it, and then I kind of helped do the implementation for it. And then kind of like through the same kind of network, I'd say like my first real paid opportunity that kind of got lucked into was there's like an alumni in my network who was a senior engineer. She was like doing freelancing contracting full time, but she had a project that she was looking to like offload, and I just happened to be the first one to respond, being like, "Yes, I'd like to give me," and it worked out. Like I wrote about this recently, but it was kind of like a miracle that I think that worked out, because usually like when you're a professional, like when you're freelancing contracting, it's like, okay, you meet the client, you do some paperwork, you sign NDAs, you kind of like you fill out these terms. In my case, I didn't have any of that, because like I write about this a lot. I used to be a very naive and kind of like dumb person, so I was just kind of like, yeah, I want to get paid. I'm making 0. You could give me like a penny or like gold nuggets, it would be better than nothing. So yeah, I was just, and she really wanted to get this project, so we ended up just like a brief email chain, like, when can you start? How cheap can you be? I'd be like, yes, and whatever rate you want to pay me. And yeah, I started shipping code to production a few weeks later.
Oh wow.
It was a lot of like figuring stuff out and writing a lot of like really crummy code, which is why I say like, don't do as I did, do better. And I'm not shy about, I'm really not shy about emphasizing that like anything I say or do, like most of the advice that I give to developers who ask me specifically about early career, it's like I know what I'm talking about because I did exactly what I didn't do, like what I would not do. And it's like, okay, like learn from my mistake and do better. Like anytime I hear someone say like, oh yeah, it should take you like X number of months or X years to on average to find a role, it's like that sounds that sounds like a bunch of like nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Like I try to be a little bit like a I try to be forward thinking insofar as like things should get easier over time, not better. And if they're not getting easier over time, it means we're either like missing the issue or we're just not focusing on the right stuff. I don't know.
Exactly. So you kind of mentioned boot camp. What are some of the things good that the boot camp did, and what are some of the gaps that you had to fill in on your own to really get prepared for the industry?
Gosh. I think structure, foundation, friends. Um, it's probably like not obvious considering how I'm talking like now, but I used to be even like a really like bad, shy, weirdo introvert.
Mm-hmm.
Um, hey, it's hashtag relatable content. Now I'm kind of like an extrovert amongst introverts, which
Mm-hmm.
is great because it. Like pro tip for anyone starting out is like if you think you're like a really introverted, shy personality, it only takes like a little tiny bit of effort for you to like really stand out amongst your peers in this field, which I'm like super grateful for. Um, so yeah, but yeah, no, I think the the model of the boot camp from the web dev track was basically, it's pretty narrow. I think I only like my web dev track was only like 8 other people. Um, Most of them actually kind of had some kind of like experience, like whether it was like evening classes or had like maybe hobbyist code up something, which probably helped. Um, but I think having that network of folks, because it was like, I mean, if I know a lot of modern boot camps also have this, but just kind of like this. Uh, One thing that will never knock on the boot camp model is that it does do a pretty good job of like cultivating like a sense of like community.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes like to a detrimental effect if it's kind of like if you're like in a bubble, and I'm like really against social bubbles in general, but the right situation that could be really helpful for kind of accelerating your career. It was so our track. We basically it was a Ruby on Rails shop. We all basically made like a like open table like style web application that we kind of focused on for like the whole 8 weeks. Um, so I think just getting it to work on an application and focus on like one concrete set of functionality and make it like sufficiently advanced and talk about, I think that was kind of super valuable, especially when I look at like newer camps that might have you like gunshot blasting through like several different applications and learning of like a breadth of skills. I, I don't know. I'm not sure what the market looks like nowadays, so maybe that's appropriate. But I think yeah, it's like structure, support, and stuff that like I didn't have. The obvious was I think, and this kind of goes like persists as an issue to this modern day, but just um, like lacking in fundamentals. Because
Mm-hmm.
I would say I think I think one of my major flaws, and this is something that actually I just had a one-on-one earlier this morning where I talked about this exact same thing. But it's like when I was coming out, like I think I had bad expectations because like a lot of the marketing around these things programs is like X% of like job placement. Like it gives you some confidence that like what you're doing is right and that it'll ultimately you'll be part of like good market fit. I think I had maybe some like misplaced confidence where I'm like I I feel a lot more comfortable and better about talking to myself, but at the same time it's kind of like if you hit me with like CS fundamentally stuff, like just foundational basics, it's like I couldn't really talk about that all that well. Um, and I experienced that in the actual interview process. Like you can pitch yourself really well, and that'll get you through the door, But then at the end of the day, you need to have like some like meet some bar for technical foundation as well to kind of like clinch it. So um, I I dislike the color green a lot because I heard that phrase so often. I've written about this too. They're just like you know interviewers just commenting like, too green, come back again, X amount. And like you learn from it. My like I'm the youngest of 3 kids, or like my siblings are both like much older than me. So like for me, like I wasn't really so discouraged by all that. Like I've always been kind of like underdog, chip on your shoulder kind of guy. So just hearing that kind of feedback, like at a certain point, you just get tired of it. Or at least I got really tired of it. I'm like, okay, so like, what am I doing wrong? Like something's not going right in my process, and you need to start
Mm-hmm.
figure that out. Um, So you just kind of like swallow that pill of being like, okay, well, you kind of skipped, you cut around some corners. Time to go back and uncut those corners and like actually hit books that maybe you would have helped earlier, and it helped. So yeah, don't. So for kids listening, yeah, eat your veggies. Don't cut corners, and know your arrays and run times and big O cheat sheets and all that good stuff. So, yeah.
Sure. So yeah, you kind of mentioned earlier that you were introverted. Same with me. Nobody would ever believe that would I would run a podcast. So like, what did you have to do to go from introvert to becoming more extroverted? And like, what were some of the benefits you've seen from becoming more social?
Benefits. I think just like from a career development perspective, like I don't know if it's just because of the field, but like I've learned that just like, how do I put this? This field is really rewarding for folks who are like self-advocating a lot. Like I had this a few times early in my career, or I guess closer to middle at this point, where like oftentimes past a certain point when you're trying to nominate yourself for promotion, you're trying to like talk to your manager about like, oh yeah, I'm like doing great. Especially larger companies, like managers are responsible for a lot of people, and they actually kind of lean on you to tell them like, hey, what have you done, and like, what are you proud of, and like, how does that match against whatever laddering or whatever. So I think the biggest benefit there is like just helping you become more of a champion for yourself. And when you become more of a self advocate, it becomes easier for people to kind of like recognition of what you've done and the value that you deliver. My personality is like I'm like a classic like self-deprecating, like self pooping on myself kind of guy. And it comes through in my humor. Like it's a little bit like gallows humor. Um, like I did this I did this in my like early in my reviews as well, like self reviews. Like yeah, I did this and this, and yeah, it's no big deal. But um, it's not just like self confidence, right? It's also like if you're dunking on yourself at critical moments when you shouldn't be dunking on yourself, then like who's everyone dunks on you. So I think that aspect of like career development has been boosted a lot by just like being more open and being more like deliberate and clear in communication. How you get to that point, I think there's a couple of different pathways you can go through. For me, it was just kind of more understanding that like, contextually you're in this space that you've passed through that gauntlet just being like, the interviewing and tech gauntlet. Like, and once you're on the other end, like it's okay to kind of feel like you belong, right? And so like setting yourself up for success to get past that, putting yourself in a place where, you feel like there's a sense of belonging, and then just like leading into that and helping them that enable you a little bit more to be more communicate a little more freely. I know once I had that my first job ever, once it kind of like got acclimated and I realized that like, oh hey, majority of my peers love my weeb jokes. That kind of helped open up the floodgates a little bit more. And thankfully, I still make weeb jokes to this day. So some things work. Something's clicking.
So yeah, I kind of noticed that you developed a pretty big LinkedIn following. What made you want to kind of like reach out and start interacting with the community and helping them out with your posts? Because a lot of people, they just get on LinkedIn, once they get a job they disappear. What made you want to stay engaged with the community?
Yeah, it does. I think it started. I think it kind of started. Well, I started posting more regularly, like when I first started at Amazon. But I think it really started kicked off like when my latter half of 2019 when I was working at Wayfair. So I was working at Wayfair at that time still. I was there for about 2 years total. And I was sort of working with my manager at the time because I really wanted to like make a strong case for, sorry, retasting my breakfast. I wanted to make a strong case for promotion to senior because I'd been in my previous company for a few years and I thought I had developed a lot of great skills. And I feel like when I moved up to Wayfair, in some ways, I got like not quite down leveled, but like, you know, that some skills got downplayed a little bit, which I was kind of bummed out about. And tangentially, that happens a lot actually when you move from like smaller companies to big companies, is that they'd be like, oh yeah, you did this, this, and this, but here it's different perceptions. So I basically, when I joined Wayfair, I was like, okay, whatever. Like I'm being paid more anyway. But near the end of my tenure, I was like, okay, I really want to like get to the next level, whatever that looked like. And so at that time, I was working with my manager, and he wasn't so convinced. Like in his own words, like you have these like different competencies that you're evaluated on, and mine was like kind of spiky. Like mine was like very like technically oriented. I was like really really strong. Go figure. But like the leadership and mentorship stuff was kind of lacking. So I was working with him to kind of identify opportunities to do that. So, we had a summer intern who was working on my team. I kind of was like his, I was kind of like his manager in some ways, which was really useful. Like I got to, even though like my only report was an intern, I got to like sit in on some of these like hiring style interviews or hiring style meetings, which is actually pretty great. Get to be in the room where decisions happen for return offers. And then, another thing, which is actually like more important, was Wayfair at that time had partnered with a local organization called Resilient Coders, which is basically it's sort of like a boot camp. Basically, they specifically target engineers who are sort of like from underrepresented communities to try to like. So we had like a kind of DEI initiative that partnered with Resilient Coders, and we hosted like a cohort of their students. We called it like Lab Zero, because like the normal labs program at Wayfair was basically just like our own internal kind of onboarding process. So like Lab Zero was kind of like we brought on some engineers that we had kind of wanted to hire through Resilient Coders and some other different outreach programs. And basically I was doing some mentorship for that cohort to kind of prepare them to join like the rest of the lab cohort as they kind of like onboarding and then join teams at Wayfair. And that was like super rewarding for me, because like these are folks who like really just like, it reminded me of like my old boot camp, right? There's like a lot of folks who don't look like a majority of your coworkers, but they have like style and like gumption. And it's like, yeah, you want to see folks succeed, and you want to, you notice when there's like an element that you resonate with, and you want to pay that forward. And so like, I was one of several mentors, and each of us on paper, we only had to like commit, a couple of hours a week. But I basically hung out in their area like as much as I could, just to offer whatever I like mentorship opportunities I could, because I got really invested in it. And like by the end of that like Lab Zero time, I had like so much feedback for the program. Like I was like, yeah, well, could I like update these modules and like try to break down these like communication barriers, and like how do we it was really rewarding for me. And so that's when I kind of realized that like, oh yeah, like doing mentorship and helping others is actually like really like fundamentally important to me. And so I kind of did a bit more just like private, like DM helps on LinkedIn and whatever. I think so. I think the one thing that like really like blew up my like presence on LinkedIn was I think I won't say his name. Someone named Brian. That's a generic enough name that he can go anonymous. Someone named Brian, who I kind of helped a little bit on LinkedIn, who reached out to me like when I first joined Amazon, and I helped him with his first job. And he came back to me as just like really, really thankful note. And I was like, oh, this feels great. And I screenshotted that, just like put it on, and that was just kind of like the genesis. And every time I kind of like log in, because there are some days I log in and I'm kind of like, I hate this. I hate social media. Like, why is it so important to post daily? I don't want to post daily. I want to post whenever I have a fun idea. but that I just kind of come back to that, and it's happened like a lot more. It's just like folks who maybe I helped like months or a year ago, they come back and be like, I got a job at some place, or I got a, thank you, and I'm like, this feels good. But I don't do it just to feel good. I do it because like it's like it's the closest I feel to feeling like genuinely altruistic. Um, and then in between those moments is just me doing a lot of shit posts, which do make me feel good, but for totally different reasons, and makes some people feel good for other different reasons as well. But yeah, so that's how you get the full experience, is to just like look past my posts and just like hit me up directly, because when I'm serious, I do. I tend to be an information hose. So yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of junior developers, they might be intimidated trying to reach out, you know, to someone who's worked in these like companies that everybody's trying to work at. Um, it should, like, when they reach out to you, like what's the best ways? They just introduce themselves, say, "Hey, my name is such and such. This is what I need," or should they come prepared? Or if somebody was to reach out to you, what do you really expect from them?
I'm really weird in that, like, don't tell anyone this, but feel free to record this and put it on the internet. But like, I literally accept. I don't really filter connection requests. I just accept them,
Mm-hmm.
and I still have like I think 20K left, so it's probably not gonna stop anytime soon. Um, I have it on my headline. Like, I self-identify as an advocate for folks who like feel like they need it. My schedule's a little bit busier nowadays. Like a few months ago, before kids and stuff, I would like take meetings in the mornings every day before work when I could. Now it's a little bit more like selective, but I'm still I try. I had one person kind of message me out of the blue like last week, and they're like, "Hey, can we have time to grab coffee?" And I was just kind of like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Whatever. I'm East Coast, you're West Coast. You have to get up at 5 a.m. if you want to chat with me, but if you want to do that, I will honor your request. So that's another thing. If you're located in a time zone where it would be prohibitively difficult for you to get up in the morning just to talk with me, I will probably honor it because I'd feel bad at that point. Uh, but yeah, if folks like seriously want to message me, they feel free to. Don't send me a resume like off the bat. Like, I get those sometimes, and I think it's a little bit tone deaf. Half the time, just delete the message. No offense. It's just like I want to keep my inbox like you know, pretty clean. So yeah, message me if you want. I type and talk like the same as I'm doing like right now. No joke. Um, so I think I'm pretty approachable. I know maybe I've had some folks message me in the past who've just been like, yeah, I followed you for a long time, but I didn't want to message you because I thought like, oh, like intimidated, or you must be so busy, or whatever. Um, just like give it a shot. I may not respond right away just because am busy and maybe I miss messages, but
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, I'm like pretty down. If you have like a background that you want to introduce yourself with, like say like, oh yeah, I'm going to this program, or I have this background or whatever, like just kind of help trigger the need to push it uh, to help it forward. Like, that's a nice bonus, but um, yeah, I mean, and don't ask like super generic questions, which is my only other ask. Like, it, uh, you know, first impressions still kind of matter to me. Like, I tell folks all the time, even if you can find like a really weird tidbit and just introduce yourself with that, I'd be really happy. The best intros are the folks who just like dig up an old post of mine and they say like, I got the inside joke of yours. I thought it was hilarious. Um, the person who reached out to me recently was like, they saw my Reddit recruiter post and they messaged me like, I don't think I would have the courage to, troll a recruiter like that. So I don't know how you did it. Please tell me how you did it. And I was like, of course, let's get on a calendar. Um, it's pretty easy. Just do like a tiny bit of effort.
Oh yeah, that was definitely helpful. I know that a lot of people are going to reach out to you after this interview. So you kind of mentioned earlier about sitting in on the hiring meetings. What were some of the things that like people may not know about that kind of got them disqualified, and what are some of the things that stood out about someone that make a company more likely to hire them that you kind of gleaned from those meetings?
Right. So I mean, I've been in a few different types of like evaluation type meetings in the past. So the one that I mentioned earlier uh, was a hiring meet for interns specifically. So we're doing return offers. Um, I mean, the process is usually like pretty similar-ish across the board, like for companies that I worked with. But this meeting in particular is basically like we had a bunch of teams in our department. Each team has like an intern that we're kind of presenting, and each team prepares like a slide. And each of those slides, we have these like standard, broad categories that we assess candidates on in general, like across the org. And we just kind of like rate them. We have a sliding scale 1 to 5, and then we just kind of, I don't know. It feels like a something measuring contest in some
Right.
ways, where it's kind of like, oh yeah, here's what they did, and blah blah blah, and then you present them, and then all the other managers who are kind of just like take turns kind of like critiquing, like skewering,
Hmm.
because it's like everyone wants their guy, everyone wants to advocate the person, and uh sometimes it is a little bit of a zero-sum game, like that's like the most honest thing any manager's ever told me, is sometimes hiring is just a zero-sum game, and to get in like really brutal environments, to get one engineer in means someone else probably didn't get an opportunity. So I worked really hard to, when I was preparing the slide for my candidate, I was like really kind of aggressive, being like, okay, I think you can finagle this rating. I thought they did really strong overall, yada yada yada. Like you do your best to kind of boost your guy, and
Hmm.
when someone else says like, oh yeah, but like but this, and then you have a counterpoint, yeah, but it saves, project they worked on saved a bunch of our engineers a whole bunch of time. So you I don't want to like get harped too much on like values, like value
Hmm.
propositions, because I know some folks are tired of hearing about like impact and value and that kind of stuff, because that's unfortunately something that gets weighed a lot. And I agree, like I think viewing candidates, viewing people strictly in terms of like value added is a little bit like overly capitalistic, but we live in America,
Hmm.
like capitalism 101. Yeah, it was good. I mean, I did get him like a return offer in that meeting, which I was really happy about. I wasn't so happy when they told me like, oh yeah, I didn't want to accept it. I got a better offer from Grubhub, but better offers are better offers. You want, doesn't matter if you're a friend, coworker, manager, whatever. You always want folks you care about to get the best deal that they can get. Um, when I was working at Amazon, I was also shadowing another basically hiring bar, and that process is surprisingly like similar foundationally. Like you have your pit,
Hmm.
like a round of interviewers, um, and basically we have these like different metrics that you compare candidates on. You give them feedback. You have maybe like one or two folks who are kind of the leading the review, being like, okay, but how do we critique this until we no longer have anything to critique? And then you kind of figure out what level, like how do they meet the bar, and if they do meet the bar, then where do we peg them at seniority wise?
Hmm.
um, so and then like, yeah, decisions get made. It's surprisingly not all that scientific. This is pretty subjective, which is why I say like,
Hmm.
if you want to, if you really care about a place, like just apply every year, because sometimes it really does come down to luck. And I harp on this a lot. Like I would say like up to 50% of the odds of you getting a job or not can just come down to luck. You have one interviewer who's just like having a crappy day. Um, you know, I've had interviews where I thought, everything went great, and then I just had one interviewer who's just kind of like, he just woke up that day deciding like, screw Andy, and that's fine. I just, you know, applied the following year, got the offer anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, it's fun. It's really subjective, and there's a lot of infighting sometimes and countering
Hmm.
opinions. But at the end of the day, you know, the thing I always like to say about hiring at this level is that like engineers are expensive, onboarding is fairly expensive. unfortunately, employers kind of have a lot of the cards when it comes to like leverage and stuff. And the kind of like token wisdom is that it's better to be more selective. Like it's better to err against like false positives, because I don't know how true this actually is. I don't know how many companies have kind of like done A/B tests where they took a chance at someone and then figured out like, it worked out. But like keep trying and try to use the feedback however you can to get better. And and I always tell candidates this: if possible, try to get your feedback like in the interview itself, because I see this a lot where a lot of companies, like when you have the recruiter call afterward to be like, what went wrong? And they're a lot more like tight-lipped, because some people think that like candidates might like countersue if they get like, potentially feedback that might be skewed a certain way. So interviewers are generally also like tight-lipped if you prod too much, but usually if you have 15 minutes at the end of the interview, 10, 15 minutes where you have questions just for you, like do your best to try to dig for what went wrong, and just try to iterate. So that's what life is like behind the curtain sometimes.
So like, so say they get an offer. Are there some things that they can do to like really negotiate a better number? What are some of the mistakes people make during the actual negotiation for the salaries?
Not negotiating is probably the biggest deal.
Right.
um, I guess it depends. Like, I'm really hard about like not being the first name number. I've written about this too, actually. My strategy is this: if you have no idea what the actual range is, then okay. So if you're really being forced to just like not name, like if you're really being forced to coerce, or you're coerced to name something, just say something like ridiculously high. That's my thing. And then if they say, "Oh, that's too high," then you can kind of like back off a little bit, be like, "Oh yeah, I'm just joshing you. I'm just kidding." And then it's like a poker. It's like a poker game. You want to get an idea of what the actual range is. And sometimes if you quote high and they say like, "Yeah, that's too high," that might at least give you like some hint as to what their actual range is. I advocate using levels to FYI a lot, at least for like public companies. If that doesn't work, I just poke around on blind, see if anyone's posted recent offers. I generally don't trust Glassdoor, because I find that Glassdoor's compensation information usually is exclusive of things of like bonuses and equity, which numbers kind of come in close. But I generally, I try to skew high and then kind of suss the situation out from there. If they do come back with like an initial offer, I try my initial counter might be something like 20% higher, and then ideally maybe we kind of like negotiate to like a 10 or 15% higher. But I think not negotiating at all is a big mistake. And even if like you have no leverage, sometimes just like asking like, "Hey, like can you just include more?" Some recruiters will just say like, "No, like we can't." And then again, it's just like a poker match. You can bluff and just say like, "Oh well, I'd like to ask for more because I'm like weighing competing offers against like who knows who can verify, but you have competing offers from blah at like X% more." And see if they call you on the bluff. Because most of the time, like I only know of like one circumstance where like some companies will explicitly ask you to provide like in writing proof of a competing offer. But you can play that game and try to bluff. The thing to remember is that if you are at that offer stage, like your leverage at that point minimum is the fact that the manager wants you on their team. And like lean into that. And sometimes it's not actually the manager who determines like the budget and all that stuff. Sometimes it's like some other department. They're just like doing what colleges do, which is like punch some numbers into a calculator and then they spit out a number, and then it's like sometimes you actually have to like negotiate. It's like if you I had this experience as well where I can speak. I'm using this example, but sometimes it's like, if you get a financial aid package for college and then you're like, I can't afford this, F this. And then you just go into the person and just be like, oh, can you just like fudge the formula a little bit to like spit out a, better package. It's a little bit like that. You just kind of have to
Mm,
like tell them like, yeah, just like turn the knobs here or there. See if you can get like some amount more. And some companies, depending on like the makeup of the package, are able to like, okay, well, maybe we can squeeze a little bit more into like, the bonus or like equity, or maybe a trade some money here to put it over here. There's usually some wizardry, and again, it kind of depends on how the company in question like is paying you. But don't be afraid to like explore, unless it's like a smaller place and they pay you like a flat salary. Then maybe just ask if they can add like a few thousand on the end. Just say like, oh, it's no big difference to me, no big difference to you. Just add it on. It's probably just pennies in the long run. But yeah,
I
and
think some people are kind of afraid that if they ask for more, that the company's going to pull the offer. Have you ever seen that scenario? Like, oh, he wants too much. We're just gonna pull.
people like to give candidates a perception to just
Mm,
like to speak them off. It's like the boogeyman. It's like, oh, I can't do that because what if they pull the offer? Like, there's a chain of events that would have to happen. Like, unless it's like a super small place where like the person who's doing your negotiating, like your HR is your manager, and they're like the one person controlling everything, then maybe. But there's like steps, like you have to. There's like a back and forth that happens, and if they are going to pull the offer, like they'll hopefully give you some advance notice, unless you're just being like really rude and incorrigible. Um, which is why I say like try to be nice to your recruiter a little bit. I love talking with recruiters, the ones who I actually want to work for, but you know, otherwise, yeah. So don't worry about that so much. I've I've personally never seen that happen. I've personally I've never talked to anyone either for whom this has happened.
mm,
Um, I think the closest is I've had like one person I helped who told me like, oh yeah, they're saying initial offer is final, and I just told them like verbatim, like just say this, just say you know, you're thank you. I think I typed this. It's like thank you for the offer. I'm currently reviewing in the process with other companies. Um, However, I'm really enthusiastic about the possibility of moving forward with blank. Um, if this offer came in at X amount, I would be open to canceling my other engagements and making a commitment with blank. This works really well if you actually don't actually have anyone you're interviewing with. And I told them just like say this and name this number and like send it back, and it worked. Like they were like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like we don't really want to fuss over like $1,000 or $2,000. They got they got a little bit of extra money at the end. So, but just be mindful. It could
mhm.
happen, I guess, but I've never seen it happen unless at least pre-COVID. I don't know how COVID changes the game. Like maybe folks are a lot more aggressive, but I always say if you're able to pass the gauntlet once,
Mhm.
congratulations, you probably can pass it again. Just got to decide whether or not what your own like tolerance, like risk tolerance is for these kind of things.
And I know a lot of people are really interested in the FAANG companies. You mind like sharing some interesting experiences? Like, what is it like working at one of these FAANGs, and ultimately, like, what kind of led you to leave and go to your current company?
Uh, I've been trying to figure out how to write about this, but
Mm,
I like to joke like fundamentally my work hasn't really changed. Like I'm still basically doing the same kind of stuff now as I did way back when. It's just kind of like, again, using that negotiation example, like how the different knobs have turned on like different responsibilities. Um, I think the going from a startup to like a mid-sized IPO company to FAANG, um, it's hard for me to generalize because in truth, for me, like every not even only every FAANG, but every major company is like, even though like on some level it's like yeah they're all like big corporations, and they have like some set of underlying problems that you kind of solve. Depending on how you look at it, each one kind of has their own like unique characteristics as well. Like Amazon is kind of notorious for their kind of like LP driven kind of like high intensity environment. I personally described it a little bit. I didn't have it as bad as some other departments. So it's like it's very team dependent as well. Like no matter which major company you work for, some companies like Google literally have like 70,000 engineers. So it's like there's no way you can make general swath pavement statements about that environment, because there's going to be like always one person in the background who's like, but my team isn't like that. My team's an exception. They don't have great work-life balance. And then maybe at Amazon there'll be an exception like, hey, my team has like long tenure and has great work-life balance. That stuff happens. But in general, I would say I compare my environment at Amazon sort of like being in a pressure cooker. It's like if you have a certain type, like a type A personality that's like competitive and like loves challenges and loves like earning every painful penny, then yeah, maybe it could be a good thing. I never accepted an offer to work there yet. Maybe someday, but Meta is somewhat similar, where it's like very kind of like product intense driven environment. But some folks thrive in those conditions and they create a lot of value. I enjoyed my time working at Amazon because I felt like I actually got a lot done in terms of just like code shipped and features seen by customers, which is always a great feeling. It's a lot you can talk about in like interviews. Google, I'd say, is it match the hype in some ways. It's a very different environment. Like it's very much engineering driven, but how you interpret that is up to you. I don't like to spoil what it's like to work there. Block, which is where I'm at now, not technically a FAANG, but we're pretty competitive. We only have around 10K employees, but it's I think we operate at a scale where folks can be like really transparent and open. It's a very like trust first, ask questions later type of environment, which I really appreciate. But at the same time, it's sort of like we have a lot of seniors as well. So it's like a lot of folks who have some experience and are equipped to like, make decisions and do their own sort of like pros, cons stuff. So, it depends. But I've never left a place because I disliked it. It's more like, oh yeah, some combination of like personal, private circumstances or just the market being insane, So, I mean, if folks really want to know what it's like there, there's only one way to find out, which is to interview and hit up LeetCode, which I intensely dislike, except for when it comes to, except when it comes to playing this sort of like game. I used to say this a lot more in my posts, but like, don't hate the player, hate the game. And the game is messed up. But the best way to fix the game is to just get in and start like trying to think for better. Because unfortunately, I think part of the reason that like so many companies have so much hoops to jump through to hire new candidates is simply that we don't have enough resources or time or literally just like bodies to help renovate the interview process. I know Block, even though we have like, we're a fraction of the size of some of these like 100K size companies, we have a lot of candidates and we actually like struggle to, we don't have enough interviewers to process everyone. So it's just like, someone's got to make time and prioritize it and be the change. It's like that Bruce Almighty movie that ends with like, be the change you want to be. Yeah.
Yeah, I know you got to go soon. So final set of questions, like how do you stay competitive, like stay abreast of current technologies while also balancing avoiding burning out? Because I know like family time is very important to you as well. So how do you keep everything balanced?
I probably don't spend as much time. I definitely don't spend as much time as I used to just on the skill set stuff. I'm fortunate that, I'm learning a lot more on the job, just because I feel like that's what's given me the skills to just not get fired. That's my highest priority. Is just like to do well enough at my own place and just stick out until stick out this weird COVID era and not have any concerns. But staying competitive, like usually, I have a backlog of books that I like to slowly read through. Engineering blogs are also like super helpful. Shout out to Jason Adams. If you're not subscribed to Functional Bit, you should sign up for that. I actually still have a ton of his newsletters that I haven't read yet. So like, I'm sure he has like a tracker that says like open rate. If and when I ever open through all his own notifications, I'm sure his engagement numbers will skyrocket because he's like waiting on Andy to engage. It is it's tough, and it's got a bit tougher with time. But the thing is, I want to say I'd like to say that at this level, where I'm like a senior engineer and like I've kind of gotten a pretty decent enough foundation that like the things that really help like move forward at this point is just like I don't want to say soft skills, because soft skills take time and practice and are actually the soft skills people talk about, I think, are actually hard skills, because it's like you have to work on them. But like being able to communicate effectively, being able to drive meetings, being able to identify value, and being able to get a point across in like a room of a bunch of people shouting. It's like quasi communication, quasi political, quasi like design and think ahead, but there's it's a different set of challenges, I would say. So in some ways it's like, yeah, I don't focus as much about off the clock like tech learning, but I do a lot of on the clock trying to figure out like, okay, did I get the best value that I could have in that meeting? Did I get my points across? Do people kind of understand? And are people just like moving along and executing at a steady pace? That's stuff that I can't necessarily learn, solving a bunch of problems offline. But when it comes down to it, it kind of depends on where you're working, what's your current skill level at, where's your seniority at, what are your expectations. Ideally your job, wherever you're working, whatever your circumstances, should be organically providing opportunities. But I know that's not necessarily always the case. I mean, I did a lot of like lead coding and reading and stuff even in my past few roles. So yeah, depends on where you are. And if you don't know, then feel free to DM me and I can help you get a game plan set up for that. Because it'll probably take me a lot more time than the next 5 minutes to finish that up.
Sure, man. Did you have any closing thoughts for the audience?
Attend meetings early, schedule them after the hour. That's something thing that that block does. Is like most meetings start 5 minutes after, because you want to give your guests like buffer time, especially if they're doing like hybrid, to like gotta run from one side of the building to the other one. So it's like, be considerate of your poor saps who are still in office and have to like actually run to meeting rooms, because listen to more comedy. Listening to comedy albums has helped change my writing and help make me a little bit happier. So comedy or other books, Chicken Soup for the Soul, whatever makes you feel good. Stay cozy is what I'm trying to say. Stay cozy.
Well, there y'all have it. Andy Wong, man, we definitely appreciate you for coming through, man. Stop by anytime.
Thanks for having me. Take care, man.
All right. Yeah. We'll catch y'all next time. Peace.